Africa is home to some of the greatest rivers on earth. The sacred Nile, the tumultuous Congo, but also the Niger, 4,200 kilometers long, the continent's third largest river. What distinguishes the Niger is not so much its length as its itinerary. With the enormous loop of more than 1,000 kilometers that it makes across Mali, the river is the link between tropical Africa and the Sahara. There, the cities of Timbuktu, Mopti, and Gao bear witness to the great Malian empires of former times. More than ever in today's Sahelian Mali, subject to drought, the Niger represents a blessing from the gods, the irreplaceable source of life for the people that inhabit its shores. Gao, a city on the river, is also a gateway to the desert. In the 16th century, when it was the capital of the Songhai Kingdom, it carried on trade with Algiers, Cairo, Tripoli, and all the major cities on the far side of the Sahara. The caravans brought silk and precious objects and left loaded with salt, ivory, and even slaves. That age is long gone. Today, Gao is no more than a sleepy town forgotten on the edges of Mali's desert. Trade with the north amounts to no more than the occasional truck coming from Algeria, loaded with dates, and then leaving with perhaps a few workers hoping to migrate north. During the high water season between August and January, the Niger today is the only true means of communication between Gao and the rest of the country. Apart from a few large river boats of the Malian Navigation Company, the Comnav, the bulk of the freight and passenger traffic is handled by pinasses, long river boats with a small motor, which crisscross the river in all directions. Gao is a low-built town, crisscrossed by large streets lined with houses of banco, a mixture of sun-dried clay and straw. This is the tomb of the Askias, the Songhai emperors. Built in 1495, it's made up of a small pyramid bristling with log supports for the masons who were in charge of the upkeep. The tomb is, in fact, the minaret of a mosque. From the summit you can get a splendid view of the city and the magnificent pink dune of Koyima. The conquest of the First Empire, born in the Mandinka territories, radiated outward from the river. It flourished from the 13th to the 15th century and reached all the way to the Atlantic coast. The second, the Songhai Empire, dominated all the Sahel during the 15th and 16th centuries with Gao as its capital. We are leaving the sleepy town of Gao and heading for the west of Mali by the Royal Road, the Niger. On board our small motorized pinnace, there are 5 crew members and a dozen tourists on their way to Timbuktu. We're navigating through the heart of the desert. Here and there, villages of banco blend in with the dunes of golden sand that dwindle gently down to the water's edge. Now and then we pass some rather surprising craft. With its single sail, sewn from grain sacks, this wind-powered pirogue is proof both of the lack of means and the ingenuity of the Malian sailors. After a few hours on the river, we're nearing the village of Tibiliti. The village women notice our boat approaching and spontaneously break into song and dance to give us a red carpet welcome. Just a few dozen meters beyond the riverbanks lies the desert, an arid, hostile no man's land. Tibiliti is inhabited by the Bozo, an ethnic group of fishermen that has been living in harmony with the river for generations. Their survival depends on the generosity of the Niger.
After we fished, we go to the market every 2 or 3 months to sell our catch. If we're lucky, we'll sell the fish for a profit at Mopti. It doesn't always work out that way.
With the money they make, they'll be able to buy staples like salt and cereals. We leave Tibiliti and continue on our route toward Timbuktu. The tourist season lasts only a few months here. The rest of the year, the crew of our pirogue works on the big pinasses, veritable workhorses of the river. They transport both passengers and freight between Gao and Bamako. And traveling can be quite long and complicated during the low water season.
I've been working with my ankles since I was 7. We ship freight between Gao and Timbuktu. We also go from Gao to Derry. You been to Derry? And often from Gao to Bamba. We go anywhere, depends, anywhere there's business.
How many days does it take to go from Gao to Timbuktu?
When the water's low, it takes 15 days.
Do you ever run aground on the river?
Yes.
What do you do then?
It's when the water is very low we get stuck. So we unload the 50 and 100 kilo sacks of millet.
Where?
Over there on the bank. And then we load them up again. That's when we're not too far from the shore. When that's not possible, we unload the freight temporarily from the big boat onto smaller pinasses of 8 or 10 tons, like this one.
We get to Bankoma at the tail end of the market. People come from all over the region, usually by pirogue, but some walk dozens of kilometers to come to the market, which takes place only once a week. They come to Bankoma to sell, to buy, or more often, to barter produce, livestock, not to mention wood, the precious firewood that is used to smoke fish and cook. The rest of the week, Bankoma is practically a ghost town, a Sahel village lost between the riverbanks and the immensity of the desert. As the last customers of the market drift away from the village, we get underway once again. In the soft light of the dying day, the Niger offers us a picture of harmonious and peaceful nature. The setting sun floods the river in a final shower of rays. Rocks lying just beneath the surface, sandbanks. The river conceals too many dangers to risk traveling at night. We stop to make camp in the dunes.
Vous vous installez là où vous voulez. C'est ça que tu voulais dire? Ouais, c'est ça. Avec le matelas,
L'assiette, il y a bouteille sur la table, il y
Bon appétit.
On the morning of the third day, we cover the last stretch of river to Timbuktu. The canal, which connected the city to the Niger up until the 17th century, is now clogged with sand. That and the advancing desert means that we can no longer reach the town by boat. So the first stage of our journey on the Niger ends here at Grigoriy, the new port 7 kilometers from Timbuktu. hidden in the heart of the Sahara, queen of the dunes, city of mystery. Ever since the 14th century and the accounts of the great traveler Ibn Battuta, followed by those of Leon Africanus, Mungo Park, and René Caillé, the myth of Timbuktu has continued to grow. And yet today, when you walk the sand-choked streets, as hard as you may look, you won't find anything left of the thriving city of the 16th century. What does it matter? The dream is larger than reality, and just the name of Timbuktu continues to stir the traveler's imagination.
What's particularly fascinating for visitors to Timbuktu is first of all its architecture, but the city conceals its mysteries as well. How is it that Timbuktu, this ancient city, has withstood the harsh test of time and has continued to endure right down to the present day?
Prompted by nothing more than the desire to have the mystery live on a moment longer, we wander through the city guided by chance and the phantoms that haunt the narrow streets.
The caravans that came from the north, bringing a variety of merchandise, would end their journey at Timbuktu. Among the more important goods were salt, gem salt from Taoudeni. There were also manuscripts, cloth, velvet, burnouses. And from the south side, the side of the Niger River, we got mostly cereals, spices, and cola. There were even traders, the Vengara, who came to Timbuktu all the way from the Ghanan Empire. They settled here and have even become part of the bourgeois elite in the present-day society of Timbuktu. Here we're really at the very gateway to the desert. It's also a river city situated on the Niger, so it is in fact a sort of link between North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa.
They used to say that Timbuktu was the meeting point of those who traveled by pirogue and those who traveled by camel. But the days when 60,000 camels a year would come to the fabled city are now no more than a fading memory, and the canal running from Timbuktu to the port of Kabata is bone dry.
Back in the heyday, the boats would come right up to here. We could bring in our produce and sell it to earn our living. But ever since the canal has gone dry, commerce has just about dried up too. It has become very hard work to work the fields. We have had to do everything by hand. We can't afford to buy farming equipment anymore.
I'd like to see the canal put back into service and have it go from here, Kabata, to Timbuktu. It would also be good if the paved road were extended to here. That would facilitate trade People would be able to buy bread, sugar, and all the staples.
Islam is one of the cornerstones of Timbuktu. The city of 333 saints is home to many mosques, but the most famous is still the Sankore Mosque. In the 16th century, its prestige was equal to that of the universities in Cordova, Cairo, or Djenné. Timbuktu became one of the most important cultural capitals of Islam.
It's true that Islam spread down from the north, but Timbuktu, as an important hub, received from Djenné not only merchandise, but also men of letters, who came either to teach or to complete their studies in Timbuktu. At that time, there were 180 Quranic schools. We had a university with 25,000 students, and the population was an estimated 100,000 inhabitants.
At Koryume, we board a new pinnace, heading for Mopti this time. At first, we don't quite know what to make of this new, younger, and more taciturn crew. But very quickly we find out that our pilot, Yusuf, nicknamed Yu by his friends, has been navigating since he was a child and knows the Niger like the back of his hand. We ask Yusuf to take us to Tinjim, a little Songhai village where a few families of farmers live. It's just after sunrise. Time to eat. A meal of rice and milk porridge taken in common by the men and boys of the family. Islamic laws govern the village's daily life. Men and women remain apart. The rules apply to Idrissa as well. He's the chief of the community and has 2 wives.
My name is Idrissa Maiga. I'll be 38 years old this year. My village is called Tinjim.
Every morning, Idrissa takes the same path to get to his fields, out of habit as much as superstition. This way, he never goes through his Peul neighbor's herd of cows. He wouldn't want to be accused of casting a spell if one of their animals were to get sick.
The field that I cultivate, I inherited it from my father. My father was always a farmer, and at the beginning it belonged to my grandfather. In my family, we've always worked the earth. Today, farming is our sole means of survival. All my ancestors are farmers, and we don't have the possibility of doing any other kind of work here. By tradition, we're not allowed to do any other kind of work.
While the men are out working in the fields, the women are pounding the millet or making their tribal artifacts, which they'll sell at the nearest market, or even better, at the Timbuktu market.
We cut the bogu grass and store it. We use it to feed our livestock. Sometimes people ask us for some for their cattle, and then we'll sell it. The bogu grows wild thanks to the rain and the flooding of the river. But now there are people who grow it by sowing the seeds because there is less and less rain. Some even plant it directly with the shoots. After we cut the bogu, like I'm doing here right now, we store it away to let it dry out. Once it's dry, we can give it to the sheep, but first we have to make sure it is dried out correctly. It's good for the sheep, it purifies their blood, but if the bogu hasn't been dried out correctly, it makes them sick.
The bourgou is sometimes a source of discord between farmers and cattle herders. For the herds follow the river shore during their migration and graze on the bourgou fields along the way. Idrissa and one of his wives come along with us on the pinnace. As we make our way upstream, we take a variety of travelers on board our pinnace, like Idrissa and his wife, who hitch a ride upriver to visit family, like this Tuareg, distressed by the accidental death of his camel. It's a simple way of sharing and helping out the river people. And so the voyage continues, for hours, for days on end. The crew is as secretive as ever. And yet, beyond the silence of each person, it's as if we're all sharing the same pleasure, as the natural pageant of the great river unfurls before us. we disembark at Dagafuru while it's still night. This is the land of the Bozo, the lords of the water. The Bozo, even though they're Muslims, still carry out their animist rites in secret, particularly before an important fishing expedition. Dagafuru is a temporary village, inhabited only a few months a year, depending on how high the water rises and the yield of the fishing areas. In spite of their age-old skills and their simple but time-tested fishing techniques, the catch isn't always good.
During the night, when there is moonlight, is it good or bad for fishing?
It's bad, of course. If you fish by moonlight, you won't catch anything. Because the fish stay at the bottom and don't budge.
Because they can't see you?
Sure,
They really see you?
they can even see the net.
The Bozo are good neighbors with the cattle-raising Pearl, who live for a few months of the year in a small camp on the opposite shore of the Niger. Often, the Pearl women will hitch a ride with the returning fishermen to come and sell a few liters of milk in Dagafuru.
Fishing is our main occupation here in the village. We're fishermen, it's true, but during the low water season we grow crops. And these have always been our occupations.
Like most of the ethnic groups, the Bozo have great respect for their elders. The young people remain respectfully behind the clan chief, who's surrounded by his counselors, and listen in silence.
Do you make sacrifices to obtain the blessings of the river?
If there are any more sacrifices, we don't make them.
Who made the sacrifices?
The Samurai used to, and even they have stopped the sacrifices.
What kind of sacrifices?
They would sacrifice an animal, a black animal.
An ox or what else?
The animal, a black goat,
Why don't you make sacrifices anymore?
because it's not good. No, it's not right. We used to talk about the spirits of the river. We used to say that there were genies and lots of other things in there. Now we don't see any of that anymore.
Day after day, they lay their catch out on the smoking grill. Once the fish is conserved in this way, it's then stored until it's sold on the big market of Mopti a few weeks or months later. The Bozo, living far from everything without money, carry on their almost self-sufficient way of life as they have done in the past. The Niger gives them not only fish, but also the clay they need to make their net floats.
Even if the river didn't yield any more fish, we would never leave this place. We'd wait patiently. If it dries up completely, in that case, we'd leave for 3 or 4 months maybe. But we'd come back here to our village, that's for sure.
As we leave Dagafuru, we enter the vast Lake Debo. This is the heart of Bozo territory, and the whole region is dedicated to fishing. Temporary villages occupy even tiny islets that hardly break the surface of the water. Two hours later, after passing magnificent colonies of birds, we reach the far shore of the lake. We're still in Bozo territory, and there are new fishing scenes to watch. The villagers hauling in huge nets stretched across the river, or a single fisherman casting his net with a sweeping, elegant gesture. The voyage from Timbuktu to Mopti takes 4 days, and as there are very few places on the way to pick up supplies, we decide to stop at Niafunke, which has one of the largest markets in the region. The fortified courtyard is built in the Sudanese style, and inside, fruit and vegetable, poultry and fish sellers rub elbows in a friendly commotion. We continue our route towards Mopti while the cook prepares the fish from the market. Now we're entering into the section of the river inhabited by the Peul. This nation of nomads is concentrated mainly in the area around Mopti, and they live almost exclusively on cattle herding. Along with their reputation for bravery and cunning, the Peul are also fervent Muslims. We stop at a campsite made up of 3 huts. Aliou, the chief of this small community, spends the greater part of his days watching over his herd.
Here, where we are now, is Douentza territory. We left our land and we'll stay here a while until the rains begin to come. Then we'll go back home because, you know, that between here and Kona, we're considered as foreigners. On the way here, we stop to sleep and start out again in the morning. So, day after day, we make our way here to Douentza. Once you get to this part of the Douentza territory, we feel a little bit more at home. We work the fields, we graze our cattle, we milk the animals, our women take care of the cooking, and we live pretty much as we do in our own land. So, that's what our life is like. Apart from the migration, we, the poor, we live in the bush. To water our cattle, we go down to the riverbank, and we always look for a spot with some grass, because we absolutely need pasture. So, that's what our life is like. The Pearl religion is the same as our neighbors. We all have the same religion. It's our occupations that differentiate us. We work with animals, whereas they work the earth. But as far as religion goes, we're all brothers. We are nomads, unlike most of our neighbors, who are settlers. You must never forget that the Pearl lives off his cattle and for his cattle. So, that's what Pearl are.
The Peul women are considered among the most beautiful of all Africa. Their physical beauty is so important to them that they'll spend hours doing their hair and adorning themselves with a quantity of jewelry. A particularly distinctive sign is the tattooing that outlines their lips. The last leg of our trip takes us to Mopti. Under a glorious sun, we follow the levee up to the port. The low water season has already begun, and the big river boats of the Komnav will remain moored for several months. Now begins the season of the pinasses that will flock in by hundreds tomorrow, Thursday, the big market day. Right from the early morning, the market takes over the port. In an unending ballet, the dockers load and unload the most incredible variety of merchandise from the holds of the pinasses, which arrived the previous night from Timbuktu or Bamako. Pearl, Bambara, Songhai, Tuareg, Bozo, tout couleur. Little by little, a surprisingly varied throng of different tribes invades the streets and alleys leading from the port. The Mopti market is probably one of the most active commercial hubs of Africa.
The port of Mopti is situated at the junction of the Niger and Bani rivers. The fishermen, the merchants, the traders, everyone that travels by these two rivers meet here to sell their goods. This is where the big boats from the Niger, the neighboring country, and the little pinasses that come down the Bani all gather. When there's high water, mainly during the winter, the river boats and pirogues can navigate without any problem. But during the dry season, when the water level drops, the big pinasses stop. Then only the smaller pirogues with a tonnage of between half a ton to 10 tons can navigate. There's a lot of traffic. There are around 2,000 pinasses that use the port, and that's just an estimate. There are 100 ton, 40 ton, 20, 15, and even 10 ton pinasses. They ship fish, rice, and salt from Timbuktu.
Of all the merchandise that comes through the port of Mopti, dried fish is undoubtedly the most important. Whole pinasses full of the fish caught over several months by the most remote tribes of Bozo are brought in to be sold at the fish market, a market that is a whole show unto itself. Sorted, classed and displayed in little piles, the fish will be sold at the Mopti market, to the city's inhabitants, but also to people from all over West Africa.
The fish that sell the best are the catfish.
Why?
It sells really well. The Malians really like it. The rarest fish is the capitaine. It's also the most expensive. They catch it in Lake Debo.
Only there?
Yes, only there. Certain buyers come from Burkina Faso, they come from the Ivory Coast, and even from Ghana. They buy fish here and then they ship it. We sell 30 tons of fish a day. There are more than 50 fish stands in this market.
During our voyage, we shared the life of the Songhoy farmers, the Bozo fishermen, the cattle-raising Phou. The trade of the Somono ethnic group is building pirogues. All the boats that we've seen since we left Gao were built by this one ethnic group, the Somono. Of all the Malian Somono workshops, the one in Mopti is certainly the most important.
There's a difference between the occupations of the Somono and the Bozo. They are both fishermen, yet you can't say that all fishermen are Bozo. Everyone thinks that the two communities practice the same activities. There is, however, a difference. The Bozo fish and build pirogues. The Somono fish, but they make the nets. And what's more, they perform sacrifices on the river. We make the karug, that is to say the pirogues, on order. There are three categories of pirogues: for fishing, for transporting freight and passengers, and the ones reserved for the tourists. We make all three here. For the launching, there's a big celebration and a sacrifice performed most often by the owner of the pirogue. The sacrifice takes place before the boat is launched into the water. Then the pirogue is fit for use. The sacrifice is what opens the river to the boat.